Andrea Leadsom, welcome to Acting Prime Minister, and thanks for inviting us down to Silverstone today.
Yes, sorry about the weather.
Wow, it's quite all right. We've got quite a nice view here of the cars zooming by. What is the racing analogy that you would love me to use about you tonight?
Well, there was one downstairs actually. We were looking at this fabulous exhibition on electric future for cars, and there was a great banner on fully charged. I think that will do.
You are quite fully charged. You're a very optimistic person.
I certainly am.
Where
yeah.
do you get that optimism from?
Well, I just think that the United Kingdom has such a bright future when we leave the European Union. You know, we've already seen 3.5 million more jobs since 2010, real wages rising at the fastest rate with the biggest target for foreign direct investment. All of these things are a fantastic backdrop, and once we leave the EU institutions, we can start forming new relationships with old friends and new allies around the world, and I just think we have a great future ahead of us.
You ran for leader, of course, last time in 2016, and you described that process as shattering. So why would you want to put yourself through it again?
Well, the one thing I did decide that after 2016 is you do have to be prepared, and of course you do have to remain optimistic. Now, obviously in 2016 we had just fought the most extraordinary campaign where the government of the day was saying, you know, the economy would collapse, we'd have cuts to pensions and the NHS. And of course, the people of the United Kingdom did decide to leave, and so you know that was all quite a heady experience. I think now is different. The economy is doing well. We've taken that decision. We just now have to leave the European Union, put that departure behind us, and then forge our new relationship with the world.
Why would you want to be Prime Minister? I mean, you've seen what's happened to Theresa May. Why would you want to be Prime Minister at a time like this? Well,
I passionately believe that our future is bright, and I have huge ambitions for our country. I mean, I was a state school educated and went to a decent university, to Warwick University, but there's nothing particularly extraordinary about my background, but I just truly believe in the United Kingdom. I truly believe in the bright future we have ahead of us. I believe in opportunity and working hard and community and society, and I believe we have the most amazingly creative and inventive people in this country, and we can be a real force for good in the world. And then at home here in the United Kingdom, my ambition is for every person to become the very best that they can be.
Theresa May believed in a lot of the same things that you believe in, and look what happened to her. I mean, do you not worry that you'll end up like Theresa May, just completely sort of downtrodden and defeated?
Well, you have to remain optimistic and you have to take a chance, and I do believe that I have a plan to take us out of the European Union, and then a plan for beyond that takes us into a new relationship with the world, a new chapter in our history.
How would you rate Theresa May as a leader? She stands down today. How many marks would you give her out of 10, do you think, for the job she's done?
I wouldn't express it like that. I think she has been extraordinarily patriotic, determined, resilient. She has worked so hard to do what she believes is the right thing, and I'm genuinely sad that she's not been able to achieve her ambitions, but I do absolutely pay tribute to her hard work and commitment to the United Kingdom.
How do you think she rates, though, compared to other Conservative leaders? Would you want to emanate her success, or would you want to do better?
You know, I think any new leadership candidate must aspire to do great things and to really tackle some of the challenges that lie ahead for us, but to seize the opportunities. So I wouldn't really compare myself to other leaders or my ambition to theirs. I think we're all different.
You need 8 nominations in order to get onto that first ballot. I know that you've got 3 MPs backing you. Who are the other 5?
I took the view early on I wasn't going to compete in that process of seeing who's supporting whom. I do have good support from amongst colleagues.
Do you have 8 altogether?
Yes, I do. Many of my colleagues.
You're absolutely sure, this is quite interesting, you're absolutely sure you have 8?
I'm absolutely sure,
nominations.
yes.
So you will definitely get through onto that first ballot?
I will.
So you'll be there on Thursday when the first vote takes place?
Yes.
Okay. And when will you be able to confirm those 8 nominations, do you think?
Well, the ballots have to be, the nominations have to be put in on Monday, and then the 1922 committee will make clear who is actually on the ballot paper.
Last time around, of course, it was a very different race. It was different circumstances, but you had a huge groundswell of support that grew during that process, and you had quite a lot more support at this stage last time around. Why do you think this time the race has turned out a little bit differently for you?
Well, I mean, this is entirely different to 2016. As I said, you know, then we had just made an amazing decision as a nation, and people were quite genuinely concerned about what happens next. And so there were those who were very determined it needed to be somebody who'd campaigned for leave, and yet the vast majority of people felt that we needed somebody who'd had a lot of cabinet experience and would be a sort of safe pair of hands who would deliver Brexit. So Theresa May rightly had a huge amount of support then, which was why I withdrew, because I didn't want to put the country through a 9-week campaign at such a difficult time where people were really quite, I think, taken aback by the momentousness of the decision we'd made. In my view, the right decision, but nevertheless it was a very different sense then of what the different factors were. And of course equally this time we've got quite a huge number of leadership candidates in the race who have very differing views about how we should leave the EU.
Do you think that's what's a little bit tougher for you this time? There are lots of Brexit backing MPs in this
Yes.
race. Easier for you to say. Do you think that maybe you're a bit crowded out this time?
I think that it's good that we've got lots of candidates. I think it's right that the party gets to choose between the different nuanced views of Brexit. But I do believe that my Brexit plan is the only workable plan that I've seen. And I think, having a very clearly set out plan, using my 2 years of experience of getting all of the legislation through, gives me a really good insight into how we can actually leave the EU at the end of October, but at the same time having a managed exit rather than a sort of a no-deal Brexit, which others are proposing.
Let's assume then that you do become Prime Minister, and we can just sort of imagine life as Prime Minister for a moment. So you walk through the door of number 10, and what we often ask people on this podcast is if you could appoint anyone to your cabinet in the history of the world, who would you love to have in there as sort of a fantasy cabinet?
Okay, so if I'm allowed to pick people who aren't living, because I've got into trouble before for mentioning people who aren't living at an inappropriate moment.
You can resurrect whoever you want.
I can resurrect William Wilberforce then, because he was a superb campaigner. I mean, he was a backbencher who is, obviously history slightly changes things, but he was largely reported to be the drive behind the abolition of slavery. And I think just that determination to make the world a better place, that is definitely one of my political heroes, and he'd be very welcome in my cabinet. We might struggle to speak to each other, of course, because our language has changed a bit since then, and he might find himself a bit astonished to be caught in the 21st century with some of the things that are ahead for us.
Yeah, maybe he wouldn't be communicating via Twitter.
Exactly, he'd struggle with texting and that kind of thing, but
And if you had to make your first speech as Prime Minister, I know that you're very passionate about Brexit, and we've heard a lot from you about Brexit, but what would be maybe the personal anecdote that would sum up what drives you as a politician, do you think?
A personal anecdote? Well, I guess I would say that for me, having had quite an unusual childhood, as in, my parents broke up when I was 4, and that's not unusual at all, but then we really did struggle then. In those days with very little state support, which is what really drives me to believe that the state should always provide a strong safety net to help people. But then very soon after, my mother and stepfather met and married, and they just worked their socks off in a furniture shop. And so I just had this, on the one hand, this 4 years, quite formative years, from 4 till 8, of a single mum and one of 3 sisters, quite struggling, and then the sort of hard work and determination of my parents. And of course the other thing I saw in the 70s was the determination of a Labour government to destroy your business, to destroy your aspiration, to tax you out of existence. So that was where I learnt my politics, and that was where I think I got my drive, my desire to see the world a better place and to help people to become the best that they can be.
That's interesting, because I was going to ask you what you think the hardest time in your life has been. Was it your parents splitting up? I mean, I suppose you were very young then, so perhaps you weren't that aware of it, but what do you think the hardest time in your life has been?
I mean, I think life has its ups and downs, and that I would say that was a difficult period. But then on the other hand, I've had a very loving family forever, and a huge family as it happens now. And so that's an enormous benefit, and have lived in some amazing communities. So I actually do think that friendships, society, family, those are very, very important things to me. I think they can really hold you when times are tough and really keep you going.
Let's talk about Brexit, because you've got this 3-point plan, as you've mentioned. Effectively, you'd like a managed no-deal Brexit.
No, I'd like a managed exit. It's a complete contradiction in terms to say it's a managed no-deal. Either it's managed or it's no-deal. It can't be both, so it's a managed exit.
But it wouldn't be a deal that we negotiate with the EU.
Yes, it would.
Kind of Okay, so how's that different to Theresa May's plan?
So essentially what I'm saying is the withdrawal agreement contains a whole raft of measures that have been agreed between the UK and the EU, and the withdrawal agreement bill contains a whole load of clauses that have also been properly drafted and are ready to go. So what I would be doing is I would be picking up the really sensible measures in the withdrawal agreement bill that all parliamentarians could get behind. So step one is to introduce second reading of a citizens' rights bill in the Commons, something that would protect UK and EU citizens but would require the EU to agree to that. So we can start the legislation here, they would need to agree. Then step two is to ramp up preparations for no deal, because we have to be ready for the end of October, come what may. Secondly, in step two, I would be preparing for a longer term virtual border in Northern Ireland. And thirdly, I'd be preparing for a temporary short-term free trade agreement along the lines of the EU-Japan free trade deal, and communicating all that very openly with the public, with businesses, and certainly with Parliament, so that we can dispel this kind of fear of what no deal might mean, or the anger about the lack of understanding of exactly what preparations are going on. And then step three is to lead a delegation during August of ministers to go and meet with key allies in the EU27, so Varadkar in the Republic of Ireland, Macron and Merkel, the French and German leaders, and go and talk to them about this sensible raft of measures that can be brought into place in the United Kingdom if the EU agree to it, and then culminating with a summit in September to which I would invite EU heads of state, but also the proposed but not yet confirmed EU commissioners, the new group who will be in place in October time, to come along to a summit and agree, first of all, that there will be no extension beyond October, and secondly, the measures that we all agree to sign up to so that we have a managed exit.
Okay, so it's quite a detailed plan.
It is a detailed plan, yes, and workable.
Yes. Fundamentally, you are willing to go for no deal, though, ultimately.
You have to be. So in any negotiation, you have to be prepared to walk away.
Okay, so are you willing to go for no deal even if somebody loses their job? Can you guarantee that nobody will lose their job in the event of a no-deal
nobody
Brexit?
can ever guarantee that nobody will lose their job. People lose their jobs and gain new jobs every single day of the week.
But do you think there's a risk of people losing their jobs in the event of a no-deal Brexit?
I think in the event of a no-deal Brexit, there will be winners and losers, and there will be some short-term disruption. I am not an advocate of no deal.
Is it worth it for someone to lose their job?
The democracy of our nation is worth everything. The people took a decision, and we have to deliver on that.
But hang on, they didn't necessarily take a decision to leave the EU without a deal.
Well,
and if they knew that was the option in front of them,
they were not asked. They were asked whether
to
to leave the EU or remain within the EU.
Absolutely, but if they'd known there was a risk of them losing their jobs in the event of a no-deal Brexit, do you think they would have gone for it?
All of that was made very, very clear. Don't forget, the government put out a leaflet to all households saying that the NHS would have cuts, that pensioners would have cuts, that we'd have 500,000 unemployed. So you can't tell me that people weren't told. Now, I do not think that all of that Project Fear stuff then has in any shape or form seen the light of day since we voted to leave, and nor would it if there was a no-deal Brexit. But there would be short-term disruption. But what we do have to accept is that the democratic will of the people is to leave the European Union. And we are not, I would not, under any circumstances, advocate either trying to make people change their mind, have a second referendum, or revoke that decision. It's a fundamental matter of our democracy. So of course, in any circumstances, we need to make sure that we smooth that exit as much as possible, but we also have to make sure that we actually leave.
Talking about a no-deal Brexit, I mean, there has been a lot of chat in the past few days about Parliament potentially blocking it. I know you're not a fan of this idea of proroguing Parliament, suspending Parliament.
No.
But do you worry that MPs would try to block a no-deal?
Well, of course I do, and without kind of wanting to bore your viewers, I've gone through every possible way in which Parliament could block a no deal. But the reality is that leaving the EU on the 31st of October is the legal default position. So unless there is an alternative agreement in place, then we will be leaving the EU at the end of October. So then the question is, so how could Parliament prevent that from happening?
Could the Speaker maybe come up with something creative?
No, the Speaker can't. Parliament can choose to vote on various measures. as we've seen in the past. But actually it is for a government of the day that is determined to deliver on the will of the people, to make sure that it works through measures to persuade colleagues, to really work with colleagues. And let's be clear, introducing a citizens' rights bill and measures to protect the future for Gibraltar, the future for goods in circulation at the time of our exit, these are sensible measures. Parliamentarians are incredibly pragmatic people. They will want to make sure that we have as smooth an exit as possible.
Were you pleased to hear that John Bercow plans to stay on for a bit longer?
Well, him staying on or not is a matter for him.
Okay. What do you think the Conservatives need to learn from that by-election result in Peterborough?
Well, as ever, I think from the European elections, from the Peterborough elections, I think what we're seeing is a great disappointment with politics generally. I mean, we're seeing for a party, the Brexit party, that didn't exist, I think, a month ago, they've taken a lot of votes because people are frustrated that we've not delivered on the referendum. But people are also, they're concerned to see politicians need to move on, and there's been too much arguing amongst ourselves and not enough reaching out. So for me as Prime Minister, one of the key things I would want to be doing is to be having a very regular phone-in so that people can actually speak to their Prime Minister, being much more accessible through town hall meetings, through televised hustings and meetings with people who can actually then give their views and feed into the process. I think communication is so important.
And what about reaching out to Nigel Farage? Would you be willing to consider some kind of electoral pact with the Brexit Party?
No, absolutely not. No, the Brexit Party is a very understandable party that is effectively campaigning to make sure we leave the EU, which is something I very much understand people wanting to support right now, but they're not a proper political party.
What about having Nigel Farage in your negotiating team if you do have to go and get this managed deal?
No, I think that I would talk to all political parties. You know, one thing I learned as leader of the Commons is that in a hung parliament, you really do have to reach out across party, and I would certainly do that, but no more with the Brexit Party than with any other.
I want to ask you something that I asked Dominic Raab the other day that caused a bit of a stir. I think I know the answer in your case. Do you consider yourself to be a feminist?
Yes, what I would say is that half the world are women and the other half owe their very existence to them. So I think it would be extraordinary for anyone to not be a feminist. You know, it depends how you define it, but essentially, to me, a feminist means being equal, egalitarian, fair to all genders, and I would extend that. You know, I think it's not just feminism, it's about equality in our whole society, and that's what I'm a keen advocate for.
Could you serve under a Prime Minister who, for example, wants to get rid of the Equalities Office? Dominic Raab wants to get rid of the Equalities Office quite possibly.
I mean, you know, I have a lot of time, a lot of regard for all of the candidates. I'm not going to sit here and sort of discuss the relative merits of one versus another. I'm putting myself forward because I really do believe I have a vision for the United Kingdom to be the best that we can be. Fantastic music in the background, you see? They love it.
We're still here at Silverstone where they're about to start their next event, but maybe we can get away with the sound if I just ask you a few fun questions to finish off the podcast.
Yes, do.
So, firstly, what would your Downing Street pet be? We ask everyone on the podcast what pets they'd love to take into Downing Street.
Oh, well, I suppose I'd continue with the cat, but I love, there's a huge, I think it's called an English blue or something like that. It's an absolutely huge cat that looks like a rug and it's sort of grey with big green evil eyes. I just love that. It would be ferocious but at the same time tantalisingly cuddly.
Excellent. Where would you love to go on your holidays as Prime Minister? Where would we snap you
chillaxing? So it's going to be the Greek islands, definitely. Yeah, Mamma Mia, you know, that's me, dancing on the table, platform boots.
You mentioned Mamma Mia. What would your song be at party conference, do you think, if you had to do a Theresa May and dance on stage?
Okay, so I really like Jason Mraz, Have It All. It's just the happiest, most optimistic song, and it's really my theme tune for life.
Excellent. Is he your favourite musician then, would you say?
Well, do you know, I'm going to go right back to someone like, I don't know, a real crooner. So I went to, my birthday treat was going to a Michael Bublé concert. Now, what a crooner. Lovely. I mean, he sort of sings everybody's songs, but so beautifully.
Everyone keeps asking everyone what the naughtiest thing is that they've done, but what's the most ruthless thing that you've done? Because you come across as very optimistic and quite kind. Have you ever been ruthless? What's the most ruthless thing you've done?
Okay, this is really awkward. So you'd have to ask my kids. They'll give you some horror stories. I'm not gonna sink myself here.
That's an excellent answer. We know that Matt Hancock's vice is waffles, toffee flavoured waffles. What would your vice be?
Okay, it's definitely not pizza. Okay. So my vice is going to be ice cream. Mr. Whippy,
Yeah.
99 with a flake.
And you like jelly babies as
I
well,
love
saw.
jelly babies. Actually, that's true. It's a toss-up between the two. I'm thinking Mr. Whippies because I actually had one yesterday for the first time in ages, and it reminded me how much I love them.
Okay. And just lastly, what do you think the scandal would be that might bring you down as Prime Minister?
Oh, okay. Probably talking back to someone, you know. You can push me that far. They say Toryans make very good friends and implacable enemies.
Right, well, there's a nice bit of applause in the
Yeah,
background.
exactly. They enjoyed that. Yeah, I think so.
Andrea Leadsom, thank you so much for coming on
Thanks.
Acting Prime Minister.
Thanks a lot, Paul.